Ward Ellison was 44 years old, and until that Saturday evening, he believed the two people sitting at his dinner table were the two people he trusted most in the world. He had built his contracting firm from nothing over 20 years. Calloused hands, early mornings, every dollar earned straight. His wife, Andrea, had been beside him for 11 of those years. His best friend, Dorian, had been beside him for 18. That night, Andrea hosted a dinner party in the house Ward had renovated room by room with his own hands. The wine was good. The conversation was easy. Ward felt genuinely at peace. Then he dropped his fork. He reached beneath the tablecloth to retrieve it. And what he saw in that 3-second moment? Dorian's hand on Andrea's inner thigh, and Andrea's hand pressing down on top of his, quietly dismantled everything Ward thought he knew about his life. He straightened up. He took a sip of water. He said nothing. Because what Ward Ellison discovered next, about the money, about the years, about the document Dorian had written to make sure Ward never saw a dime of what he built, would not be answered with anger. It would be answered with something far more dangerous. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The drill bit caught the light when Ward held it up. He turned it once between his fingers, checking the tip the way a doctor checks a pulse. Quiet, certain, looking for something only he knew how to find. Satisfied, he set it into the chuck and tightened it down with 3 clean turns. No more, no less. It was 4:47 in the morning. The garage workshop smelled like sawdust and machine oil and the particular cold that settles into concrete before the sun comes up. Ward moved through it the way he moved through everything, without hurry, without waste. The tool wall ran the full length of the south side. Wrenches ranked by size, drill bits nested in their labeled foam, levels hanging perfectly horizontal, because a crooked level was a joke Ward didn't find funny. Everything had a place. Everything was in it. Above the workbench, 2 things were pinned to the pegboard. A photograph of his mother, Ruth, taken at her retirement party 7 years back. She was laughing at something off-camera, head thrown back, one hand pressed flat against her chest, like joy was a thing that needed holding in. And beside it, older, slightly curled at the corners, Ward and Dorian at 22. A job site somewhere in the east side of the city. Ward couldn't remember which one anymore. They were grinning the way young men grin when they don't yet know how much things cost. Dorian had his arm thrown around Ward's shoulders. Ward was holding a hammer. He glanced at it the way he always did. Then he got to work. Andrea called the workshop an eyesore. Not cruelly. She said it the way she said most things about the house, with a kind of breezy authority, like she was reading from a list of improvements that the universe owed her. Ward had renovated every room in this house with his own hands. The kitchen cabinets, the crown molding in the hallway, the deck in the back where she hosted her Sunday morning yoga sessions in the summer. He'd built all of it. The workshop was the one room he'd built entirely for himself, and she had never once stepped inside it. He didn't dwell on that. Ward was not a man who dwelled. 11 years of marriage had a texture to it, the same way old wood had a texture. Worn smooth in some places, rough in others, the grain of it visible if you looked close enough. They had no children. Andrea always had a reason to wait, and the reasons had changed over the years the way seasons change, naturally without announcement, one sliding into the next before you quite registered the shift. She taught yoga 4 days a week and maintained a social calendar that kept her busy in the particular way that left no visible gaps for Ward to question. He didn't question. That wasn't his nature. Ward fixed what was broken. What wasn't broken, he left alone. The marriage had cooled. He knew that. He attributed it to busyness, to the firm, to the natural settling that happened when 2 people stopped being new to each other. He told himself this was ordinary. Most mornings, he believed it. He set the drill down, picked up the leather notebook from the corner of the bench, worn brown cover, spine cracked from years of opening, and checked his materials list for the day's first sight. The notebook was dense with his handwriting. Estimates, measurements, supplier contacts, notes to himself in the margins. It was the most honest record of who Ward Ellison was, a man who wrote everything down and trusted what he could verify. He closed it, tucked it under his arm, and killed the workshop light. By 7, he was on site. By 4, he was home, showered, and standing in the kitchen doorway watching Andrea arrange cheese on a board with the focused energy she brought to anything people would see. The dinner party was her idea, as most social occasions were. 6 people, Ward and Andrea, Dorian and Beverly, and 2 of Andrea's friends whose names Ward could never quite keep sorted. One taught Pilates, one was in real estate. Both laughed too loudly at Dorian's jokes. It didn't matter. What mattered was that Dorian was coming, and Beverly and Ward was glad for it. Dorian was the kind of company that made a room feel bigger. 18 years. They'd met on a job when Dorian was a young associate doing site inspections for a developer, and Ward was the contractor who'd caught 3 code violations the developer's own team had missed. Dorian had laughed at Ward's bluntness instead of bristling at it. They'd gotten dinner after. They'd been brothers since. By 8 o'clock, the table was full and warm. Candles burned low in the center. Andrea's playlist moved through something soft and unobtrusive in the background. Beverly was telling a story about a hospital board meeting that had dissolved into total chaos over a catering invoice. And she was telling it well. Dry, precise, timing each beat. And Ward was laughing genuinely, the kind of laugh that surprised him when it came out. Dorian sat across the table, holding his wine glass by the stem, watching Beverly tell her story with the half-smile of a man publicly proud of his wife. He caught Ward's eye and gave a small nod, the kind that meant good evening, good wine, good people. Ward nodded back. This was what he'd built, right here. A life full enough to sit still inside. He reached for his fork. It slipped, fell. He dipped below the tablecloth to retrieve it. Dorian's hand was on Andrea's inner thigh, high up, comfortable. The hand of a man who had been there before. Andrea's hand covered his, not pushing away, pressing down. Ward straightened up. He placed his fork back on the table. He took a sip of water. Beverly was finishing her story. Andrea's friend, the one in real estate, was already laughing in anticipation of the punchline. Nobody looked at Ward. Nothing in Ward's face gave them a reason to. Ward set his napkin on the table. "Excuse me a second," he said. His voice was easy. Warm, even. Andrea glanced at him with the quick, automatic smile of a hostess checking that everything was fine. He gave her a small nod. All good, and pushed back his chair. He walked to the bathroom at the end of the hall. He stepped inside. He locked the door behind him. He didn't turn on the light. He found the edge of the bathtub in the dark and sat down on it. The porcelain was cold through his slacks. He set both hands on his knees and breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow and even. The way he breathed on a job site when something had gone badly wrong and the crew was watching him for direction. 1 minute passed. He did not cry. Crying was for after. Maybe. This was not after. This was the moment where you assess the damage before you touched anything. You never touched anything before you assessed the damage. 2 minutes. His mind moved the way it moved on a troubled build, backward through the structure, looking for where the problem originated, not the surface crack, the source. Andrea, coming home at 7:30 on a Tuesday, saying yoga ran late, the particular way she said it. Fluid, unrehearsed, already moving toward the kitchen so her face was away from his. The guest room she'd repainted last spring. a deep charcoal gray that Ward had offered to do, and she'd waved him off, said she'd hired someone, didn't mention it until it was done. He hadn't thought anything of it. He was renovating a school gymnasium that month. He had been busy. The living room furniture replaced the fall before that. New sofa, new rug, new lamps. Andrea presenting it as a surprise, smiling at his reaction. He'd said it looked great. It did look great. He hadn't asked who helped her choose it. Dorian, at the 4th of July cookout 2 summers back, standing in Ward's backyard, tending Ward's grill with the ease of a man entirely at home. Ward had handed him the tongs himself. Had felt grateful, actually. Grateful that his best friend loved his house, loved his wife, loved the life Ward had built. He sat with that memory for a beat. Then he breathed it out and let it settle into the growing list of things he now understood differently. 3 minutes. He stood, reached for the light switch, clicked it on, and looked at himself in the mirror above the sink. His expression was calm. Not forced, genuinely calm, the way only goes that deep in a man who has spent 20 years making decisions in front of crews who needed to believe the problem was solvable. He turned on the tap, washed his hands thoroughly, and dried them on the hand towel Andrea had chosen, white, with a thin gray border. He unlocked the door and walked back to the table. Beverly had moved on to a second story. Dorian was refilling glasses. Andrea looked up when Ward sat down and handed him the wine bottle with a small, natural smile. He took it. He poured. He picked up the thread of Beverly's story and laughed in exactly the right place. For the next hour, Ward Ellison was the best dinner guest at his own table. He was present, easy, funny. He asked Dorian about a case Dorian had mentioned the week before and listened to the answer with genuine seeming interest. He topped off Andrea's friend's glasses without being asked. He complimented the cheese board. He was very good at it. That surprised him a little. How good he was at it. The guests left by 10:30. Beverly hugged Andrea at the door and told her the food was wonderful. Dorian clapped Ward on the shoulder on the way out. Firm, affectionate, 18 years of habit in a single gesture. Ward gripped his hand and smiled. "Good night, brother," Dorian said. "Good night," Ward said. They cleaned up together, the way they always did. Ward cleared the table while Andrea loaded the dishwasher. They moved around each other in the easy choreography of a long marriage. Not touching, not talking much, but not awkward either. Just 2 people in a kitchen at the end of an evening. When they were done, Andrea reached up and kissed his cheek. Her lips were warm. She smelled like wine, and the particular perfume she saved for company. "Good night," she said. "Night," he said. He watched her walk upstairs. He listened to the sound of the bedroom door closing. Then he stood in the kitchen in the quiet and made 3 decisions, not dramatically, not with grief, but with the same flat practicality he brought to a structural problem on a build. He would not confront either of them until he knew everything. He would not let either of them know he knew. He would find out exactly how deep this went before he moved a single inch. Later, in the dark beside her, Ward lay on his back with his eyes open. Andrea's breathing slowed and settled into sleep. The ceiling above him was invisible in the black. He stared at it anyway. He did not move. He did not sleep. He was already building. Andrea left at 8:15. Ward heard the garage door go up, then down. He waited until he heard her car reach the end of the street. Then he sat down at the kitchen table with his laptop, both phones, and the leather notebook he used for job estimates. He opened every account. The joint checking was fine. Grocery runs, the gas company, a few restaurant charges. Normal. He moved past it. The joint savings was not fine. He found the first transfer 14 months ago, a Thursday. $480, moved to an account number he didn't recognize. He wrote it down in the notebook. Below it, he wrote the date and the day of the week. He kept scrolling. The next one was 11 days later. $350. Different amount. Same destination account. Then $720, 3 weeks after that. Then $510. Then $300. The amounts were never the same twice. Never round numbers. Never large enough to trip a notification he'd remember seeing. He kept scrolling and kept writing, each transfer in its own line, the amounts in one column, the dates in another, the running total in the margin. It was the same way he tracked materials on a complicated build, not because he couldn't do the math in his head, but because he needed it on paper where he could see the full shape of it. After 40 minutes, he had 2 full pages filled out in his tight, even handwriting. He added the margin column. $47,230. He set the pen down. He looked at the number for a moment. Then he drew a box around it, just a clean, square box, and moved on. He pulled up Dorian's contract files next. 3 years of filings for the firm. Liability agreements, subcontractor terms, insurance clauses, vendor documents. Ward had signed most of them at Dorian's office, or over lunch, or once in a parking lot before a game when Dorian had said just routine, same as last year, and handed him the pen with the easy confidence of a man who had always been trusted completely. Ward had always been comfortable with that. Dorian was the attorney. Ward was the contractor. Every man in his lane. He photographed every page now. Slow, methodical, each one flat on the kitchen table in good light. He wasn't a lawyer. He couldn't read all of it the way Dorian could. But he had spent 20 years reading blueprints, documents that looked dense and technical until you knew what you were looking for. And something in one of the liability clauses snagged him the same way a bad load calculation did. Not obvious. Just wrong in a way he could feel before he could explain. He photographed that page twice, circled nothing, just made a note beside the date. Check this. He closed the folders. He put the notebook in his truck bag. He called Patricia. Her name was Patricia Osei. He'd renovated her office building 4 years back, a gutted 2-story space near the county courthouse that she wanted rebuilt from raw concrete into something that looked like it meant something. She'd walked every phase of the build herself, in heels, asking questions no client usually asked. On the last day, handing him the final check, she'd slid her card across the table with 2 fingers and said, "If you ever need the other kind of help." He had kept the card. He sat in his truck in the driveway when he called her. Not a job site. He hadn't made it there yet. He just needed to be out of the house. She answered on the second ring. "Ward Ellison," she said. Her voice was precise, unsurprised, like she'd half expected the call eventually. "Patricia, I need a referral to a private investigator. Somebody good and quiet." A beat. "All right," she said. "No question about why. No is everything okay. Just the particular stillness of a woman who understood that if a man like Ward was calling her directly, instead of asking around, the situation was serious, and he already knew what he was doing. "I'll text you a name inside the hour," she said. "She's the best I've used." "That's all I need," Ward said. "Thank you." Patricia said, and ended the call. He drove to the job site anyway, parked in the gravel lot beside the supply trailer, and sat there for a while looking at the framed structure going up against the sky. A new medical office building, 12 weeks in, ahead of schedule. His crew moved between the beams at the far end. He watched them without getting out. He wasn't needed here today. He knew that before he came. He just needed somewhere to be that was his, something he had built, something that was exactly what it appeared to be. After a while he started the truck and drove home. He got dinner started before she came back. Chicken thighs in a cast-iron pan, rice on the stove, something green wilting in a colander by the sink. He was comfortable enough in a kitchen to do it without thinking, which left his mind free to run through the numbers again while his hands worked. When the garage door went up, he turned down the heat on the rice. Andrea came in carrying her mat bag, cheeks a little flushed from class, her hair pulled back. She stopped in the doorway between the kitchen and the hall and looked at the stove with what seemed like genuine warmth. "You cooked," she said. "Figured it was my turn." He glanced over his shoulder at her and smiled. Easy. Unhurried. She hung up her bag and came into the kitchen. She squeezed his arm as she passed, reaching past him to steal a look at the pan. "Smells good," she said. 15 minutes, he said. The coffee shop was the kind of place that stayed half empty on weekday mornings. No music, plain tables, a chalkboard menu, nobody updated. Ward had driven past it 100 times without ever going in. He arrived 8 minutes early, chose a table against the back wall, facing the door, ordered a black coffee he didn't particularly want, and set his hands flat on the table. She walked in at exactly 9 o'clock. Hazel was maybe 50, compact, with close-cropped gray hair and the kind of face that didn't offer much. Not unfriendly, just contained. She wore a dark jacket and carried a slim canvas bag over one shoulder. She spotted him before she reached the counter, walked straight to his table, and sat down without any of the small social warmth people usually use to fill a first meeting. "Ward," she said. "Hazel." He nodded. "Can I get you something?" "Already ate." She unzipped the bag and set a plain manila folder on the table. Blank. "Patricia told me the broad strokes. I like to hear the specifics from the client." Ward appreciated that. No performance, no reassurance, just work. He told her what he needed. Not everything he knew, just enough to point her in the right direction. His wife's weekly schedule. Yoga classes Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings. A social lunch on Tuesdays. Errands and appointments spread through the week, usually between 10 and 2. His attorney, Dorian Pike, offices downtown, known to keep his Tuesday afternoons loose and his Thursday mornings off calendar. Ward gave her Dorian's firm address, his personal cell number, the make and color of his car. He slid a folded sheet of paper across the table. Dorian's LLC information, pulled from the state business registry the night before. He'd found it searching Dorian's name, a property holding company registered 2 years ago that Ward had never heard of. Hazel picked up the paper, scanned it once, set it in the folder. "Financial intersections," Ward said. "Anything connecting the two of them that runs outside my knowledge? Any account? Any entity? Any transaction? Whatever you can document." "Understood." She wrote 3 short lines in a small notepad. Then she looked up. "Timeline?" "As fast as accurate allows. 2 weeks for a solid first report. Maybe 10 days if there's obvious activity." "Fine." She named her retainer. Ward pulled an envelope from his jacket and set it on the table without counting it in front of her. She didn't open it. She put it in the bag and stood. "I'll be in touch through the email Patricia set up," she said. "Don't contact me any other way until I reach you first." "Understood," Ward said. She left. He sat for a moment, both hands around the coffee cup. Then he drank it, paid the bill, and walked out into the late morning sun. The job site was loud when he pulled up. A concrete pour on the east side, 2 flatbeds unloading steel, somebody's radio fighting the noise and losing. Ward moved through it all without breaking stride, nodding at the crew, checking 2 things on instinct before he found Clinton near the supply trailer with a clipboard and a phone pressed between his ear and his shoulder. Clinton held up one finger without looking at him, finished the call, turned. "Permits cleared on the south stairwell," he said. "Inspectors coming Thursday." "Good." Ward leaned against the trailer. He kept his voice level and his eyes on the crew. "I need a favor. Separate from the project." Clinton waited. Every subcontractor invoice routed through Dorian's firm in the last 3 years. All of them. Clinton's expression didn't shift. He just looked at Ward for a moment. The way a man looks when he's clocked that the question matters more than it sounds. "How soon?" Clinton said. "Tomorrow morning, if you can." "I can." He made a single note on the clipboard. "You need anything else with that?" "Just the invoices," Ward said. "That's all." Clinton nodded once and turned back to the site. No follow-up questions. No raised eyebrows. Just the quiet, efficient loyalty of a man who understood that Ward wouldn't ask for something without a reason, and that the reason was Ward's business, until Ward made it otherwise. Ward watched the pour for a few minutes before he left. He stopped at the florist on the way home. It used to be a Tuesday habit, something he'd started early in the marriage and kept up for years before life got busy and routine settled in and the gesture quietly disappeared. He hadn't thought much about stopping. He thought about it now as he paid for a bunch of yellow tulips, Andrea's preference in the early years. He wondered if she'd remember that. She was in the living room when he came through the door. He held out the flowers. Something moved across her face, quick and practiced. A soft opening of the eyes, a slight parting of the lips, the particular smile a person produces when they know the shape of a moment and how to fill it. "Ward," she said. Her voice landed warm, like she meant it. "Figured it had been a while," he said. She took them and pressed a kiss to his cheek. She carried them to the kitchen, already talking about a vase. He watched her back. He watched how naturally it came. They ate dinner at 6:30. Andrea talked about her day. A difficult student in her noon class. A conversation with a friend about a vacation they were both considering. Ward listened, asked the right questions, refilled her water glass when it got low. She was good. That was the thing sitting across from him now, heavier than any of the numbers in his notebook. She was very good. And people didn't get that good at something in 14 months. They got that good over years, building the habit slowly, the way water works through concrete, patient and invisible, until the damage is already done. The file came through on a Thursday morning. Ward was sitting in his truck outside a hardware supply store, engine off, a cup of gas station coffee going cold in the cup holder. He saw the notification on the secure app Patricia had set up. A plain icon, no subject line, nothing identifiable. He tapped it open. Entered the password. Let the file load. Hazel didn't write much. She didn't need to. The photographs did the work. Time-stamped. Clear. Tuesday afternoon, 1:14 p.m. Andrea in a dark coat, sunglasses pushed up on her head, walking through a parking garage. Dorian 3 steps behind her, hand light at the small of her back. The kind of familiar touch that only exists after a long time. Next photograph. The same garage, different angle. A door. A unit number. Then the LLC documentation. 2 pages. Hazel had highlighted 3 things in yellow. The LLC name, the registered agent, Dorian's personal attorney, a name Ward didn't recognize, and the registration date. 3 years ago. Ward set the phone face down on the passenger seat. He looked through the windshield at the parking lot. A woman was loading mulch bags into an SUV. A teenager was collecting carts. The morning was doing what mornings do. Ordinary, indifferent, moving right along. 3 years ago. He had met Dorian for his birthday 3 years ago. They'd had dinner, just the 2 of them, at a steakhouse Dorian had picked. Dorian had ordered the good bourbon and made a toast about brotherhood. Ward could still remember the weight of the glass in his hand. The money, the $47,000, started moving 14 months ago. He'd found that and thought, this is where it began. The betrayal had a start date in his mind, a 14-month wound, but the apartment LLC was 3 years old, which meant the money wasn't the beginning. The money was what you did in the middle of a plan, when you were ready to start moving toward the exit. They had been building something for 3 years, with his money, using his attorney, inside his marriage. And they'd done it so cleanly, so patiently, that he'd handed them flowers last Tuesday and watched her smile and felt nothing but cold confirmation. Ward picked the phone back up. read through the rest of the report. Thursday mornings. Beverly was at the hospital by 7. Dorian's calendar was clear by design. Andrea's yoga class ended at 9:15, which left a clean window. Hazel had documented 5 consecutive Thursdays, 5 Tuesdays, 10 meetings, probably hundreds before that. He sat for another few minutes. Then he got out of the truck and went inside the hardware store. He bought enough to start the kitchen renovation he'd been putting off for going on 2 years. New cabinet hardware, a better faucet, tile for the backsplash, a warm cream color Andrea had picked out of a magazine and then stopped mentioning. The way she stopped mentioning things she'd decided she wasn't getting. He loaded the truck methodically, checked his list twice, drove home at an easy pace. Clinton came by that evening with a printed file and a USB drive. They sat at the workbench in the garage. Ward's space, not the house. Clinton set the papers down without ceremony and let Ward go through them. It took about 12 minutes. Dorian's firm had billed Ward's company across 31 separate invoices over 3 years. Some of the charges were legitimate. A lot were duplicated. The same service billed twice under different line descriptions. Several were inflated, sometimes by 40%, sometimes more. And 2 invoices near the back of the stack were for work that, as far as Clinton could determine, had simply never happened. No corresponding service, no communication, no record. Just a number on a page and a date. $31,000. Ward pulled the leather notebook from the shelf above the workbench. He opened it to the page where he'd mapped Andrea's transfers. Below that total, $47,000, he wrote Dorian's number. Then he drew a single line underneath both figures and wrote the sum at the bottom, $78,000. He looked at it for a moment. Then he closed the notebook. "Good work," he said. Clinton nodded. "You need anything notarized? I know a guy 2 blocks from the office." "Get it done," Ward said. "All of it." He waited until Clinton's taillights disappeared down the street before he went back inside and called Patricia. He told her he needed an estate attorney and a forensic accountant, both on immediate standby. He told her he wasn't ready to move yet. He told her to be ready when he was. She said she would be. He started the renovation that Saturday. Andrea stood in the kitchen doorway mid-morning, coffee in both hands, watching him mark measurements along the cabinet rail. She had the particular look of someone trying to read a situation and coming up just short. "I thought you said we were waiting until spring," she said. Ward drew a level line across the wall. "Clean and exact. Figured it was finally time," he said. He smiled at her over his shoulder. Easy. Warm. The same smile he'd been giving her for 11 years. She smiled back. And neither of them meant any of it. Ruth Ellison's house smelled like it always had. Garlic and old wood, and something sweet on the stove that Ward could never quite name, but had been chasing his whole adult life. He let himself in with his key. She was already in the kitchen. "I heard the car," she said, without turning around. "Hey, Mama." She pointed at the table with a wooden spoon. He sat. That was the whole greeting. That was enough. Ruth was 68 and moved through her kitchen like she still owned it completely. Which she did, same as she always had. Small woman. Precise. The kind of person who never made an unnecessary motion. She'd taught 6th grade for 31 years, and somewhere in those decades she had perfected the particular stillness of someone who had watched too many people too closely for too long to be surprised by any of them. She set a plate in front of Ward. Rice, braised chicken, a pile of greens that had been cooking since before he arrived. She sat across from him and picked up her fork and waited. Ward ate. He was genuinely hungry, and the food was genuinely good, and for a few minutes he let himself just be her son. Not a man running calculations, not a man carrying $78,000 of betrayal in the back of his chest, like weight-bearing ballast. Just her son, at her table, eating food she made because he existed. Then he set down his fork. "Mama, he said. "I want to ask you something." She looked at him, said nothing. "Andrea," he kept his voice easy, careful. "What did you really think of her? From the beginning?" Ruth didn't answer right away. She set down her own fork. Not quickly, deliberately, the way she did everything. She folded her hands on the table and looked at her son with the unhurried attention she used to give students who were asking the wrong question in the right direction. "I was always gracious to that woman," she said. "I know you were. I want you to understand that first, because what I say next doesn't change that." Ward nodded. Ruth looked past him for a moment, like she was pulling something out of storage she hadn't touched in a while. Then she looked back. Andrea walks into a room, and the first thing she does, before she says hello, before she takes off her coat, is add it up. What things cost, what they say about the person who owns them, what the whole picture is worth. She said it plainly, without heat. Every dinner I ever hosted, she noticed the tablecloth before she noticed me. Every house she walked into, she was appraising it. I watched her do it for 11 years. Ward was very still. "She never once asked me a real question about my life," Ruth continued. "Not one that didn't find its way back around to money or status, or what Ward was earning or where the firm was heading. She'd ask how I was, and then wait for me to finish so she could talk about something that mattered to her." She paused. "I don't think she even knew she was doing it." "That's almost worse." The kitchen was quiet. The pot on the stove made a small, steady sound. "I chose not to say anything," Ruth said, "for a long time, because you were happy, or I thought you were happy, and I decided that was more important than being right about her character." She looked at Ward directly. "That was my choice. I own it." Ward's jaw was tight. He loosened it. "What did she do?" Ruth asked. Just like that. Calm and direct. The way she'd always asked him the hard questions since he was 9 years old and thought he could hide things from her. "I'm handling it, Mama," he said. "I just needed to hear you say it out loud." She studied him. He held her gaze and let her look, the way he always had, because she'd never once used what she found there against him. Then Ruth reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. Her hand was small and dry and warm, the hand that had signed his school forms and steadied his first toolbox, and pressed against his back at his father's grave when he was 11, and had no idea what to do with grief. "You were always the most patient person I ever raised," she said quietly. "I used to worry about that, thought people would see it and take advantage." Ward said nothing. Ruth's eyes stayed on his, steady and clear. "I see now," she said. "I should have been worrying for them." He left an hour later with a foil-wrapped plate for the week and the shelf dimensions Ruth had mentioned needing. He'd get to that soon, he told her. She walked him to the door and patted his arm once and went back inside without watching him go. That was her way. He drove home through the early evening with the windows down. The air was cool. The roads were easy. He didn't turn on the radio. He didn't need to think anymore. That was the thing. He'd come to his mother's house carrying questions he already knew the answers to, and she had said them back to him in her voice, which was the only voice that had never once told him anything but the truth. The foundation was solid. Now he could build. Patricia's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown that Ward had walked past 100 times without ever going inside. Glass and clean lines. The kind of place that charged by the hour and made sure you felt it. Her conference room was quiet. A long table, 4 chairs, a window that looked out over the city at mid-morning, when the streets below were full of people going places they thought mattered. Patricia sat across from Ward. Beside her was a man named Gerald Ossie, estate attorney, gray at the temples, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He had a calm, practiced way of opening folders that told you he had delivered difficult information before and knew how to do it without drama. Ward had brought his own folder, everything Patricia had asked for. The original will, the updated documents, 3 years of Dorian's contract work. Gerald started from the beginning. Ward watched him read, watched his eyes move down the pages with the particular stillness of a professional recognizing something wrong. Gerald turned one page, then went back to the previous one, then forward again. He took off his reading glasses. "Mr. Ellison," he said, "when was the last time you read this will? The updated version? In full?" "Dorian walked me through the changes over drinks," Ward said. "About 2 years ago. Said it was mostly boilerplate cleanup." Gerald set the document flat on the table and turned it so Ward could see the section he was pointing to. The language was dense, legal, but Gerald translated it sentence by sentence with the patience of a man who understood that the damage lived in the details, and the person sitting across from him deserved to understand every inch of it. The updated will gave Andrea full control of Ward's business upon his death. Not a percentage, not a shared stake. Full control, with liquidation authority, meaning she could dissolve the firm entirely and convert its assets to cash. That cash would then route through a holding LLC before distribution. Gerald slid another page across. The LLC name. Ward recognized it. It was the same LLC Hazel had pulled in her report. The one registered 3 years ago. The one attached to the apartment. Dorian's LLC. Ward read the page twice. Then he set it down. The room was very quiet. Patricia said, "I'm going to step out and give you some time." She didn't wait for him to answer. She stood, and Gerald stood with her, and they walked out and pulled the door shut behind them with the soft click of people who knew when to leave a man alone with something heavy. Ward sat with both hands flat on the table. He looked at the documents spread in front of him, the updated will, the LLC registration, Hazel's photographs, Clinton's invoice audit, all of it laid out in the clean, fluorescent light of a conference room on the 14th floor. He breathed in, held it, breathed out. This was not about a marriage going cold. It was never about that. The affair was the cover. The money transfers were the middle. This, the will, the LLC, the liquidation clause, this was the destination. They had built a structure designed to transfer everything Ward had ever made directly into Dorian's hands. The only thing standing between their plan and completion was Ward himself. He had been working against a clock he didn't know was running. He breathed in again, out, steady. When Patricia came back 9 minutes later, Ward was sitting exactly as she had left him. Hands flat, eyes forward. "Tell me what I need to do," he said, "to make sure not $1 goes to her." Patricia sat down and opened her legal pad. "Quite a bit," she said. "And I know exactly how." They worked for 2 hours. By the time they finished, a corrected will had been drafted, one that Dorian had no hand in and no knowledge of. Ruth Ellison was named co-trustee. The business was restructured with full documentation through Patricia's firm. Every asset was accounted for, protected, and filed before Ward shook Gerald's hand and took the elevator back down to street level. He sat in his truck for a moment before starting the engine. One more thing. He found Beverly's number and called it. She picked up on the second ring. "Beverly." He kept his voice easy. "It's Ward. I'm sorry to call out of the blue like this. I was hoping we could meet. Privately." A pause. "It concerns Dorian." The silence that followed was not the silence of surprise. It was the silence of a woman who had been carrying something unnamed for a long time and had just been handed permission to set it down. "When?" "Whenever works for you. Sooner is better." "Tomorrow," she said. "Lunch." They met at a restaurant neither of them had been to before. Neutral ground. Ward brought Hazel's documentation and the LLC records in a plain folder. He did not lead with emotion. He led with facts. The photographs, the dates, the registration, the will. He walked her through it the way he would walk a client through a structural assessment. Here is what exists. Here is what it means. Here is the damage. Beverly absorbed it page by page. Her face moved. Ward watched it move, but she did not cry, and she did not raise her voice. She sat very straight and very still, like a woman who had been quietly bracing for impact for longer than she could name. When he finished, she closed the folder. She looked at Ward across the table. "What do you need from me?" she said. He called Clinton from the parking lot before he pulled out. "Hey," Ward said. "Start clearing your calendar for the end of the month." A short pause. "How much of it?" "One evening," Ward said. "I'll handle the rest. I just need you at the table." "I'll be there," Clinton said. No questions. Ward ended the call. He set the phone on the passenger seat. He pulled out of the lot and drove toward home through the late afternoon, the city moving past his windows in long, familiar shapes. The will was filed. The assets were protected. Beverly was in. The board was set. Ward called Dorian on a Tuesday evening. He was standing at the kitchen counter when he dialed. Andrea was in the next room. He could hear the low sound of her television program through the wall. Dorian picked up on the first ring. "Ward, what's good, brother?" The word brother landed the way it always did. Easy, warm, automatic. Ward had heard it 1,000 times. He received it now the same way he received everything lately. He filed it away. "Hey, man. Listen, I just locked in the Crestfield municipal contract. The rec center project." Ward let a beat of genuine satisfaction into his voice, because the contract was real, and the satisfaction was real, even if everything else about this conversation was not. "I want to do a proper dinner. Family style. You and Beverly, my mother, Clinton. Sit down together like we used to." Dorian's response was immediate and warm. "That's huge, Ward. That project, I know how long you've been after that one." "Absolutely. Yes. When are you thinking?" They settled on a date. Ward kept it short, kept it light. He ended the call the way Dorian expected. Easy, grateful, nothing out of the ordinary. He set his phone down on the counter. Then he walked into the living room and asked Andrea if she'd be willing to plan the menu. Her face opened up the way it did when he gave her something to organize. She sat forward on the couch. "Of course," she said. "What are you in the mood for?" "I was thinking we could do that lamb, the slow-roasted one. And I found this new appetizer I've been wanting to try." "Whatever you think," Ward said. "You always do it right." She smiled at that. A real smile, or close enough to one that he couldn't tell the difference anymore. He smiled back and let her talk through the menu while he stood in the doorway and listened, and did not think about what she didn't know she was planning. He briefed Clinton the following Thursday afternoon on a site visit. They stood near the back of an unfinished ground floor, away from the crew, voices low under the sound of a compressor running 2 rooms over. Ward did not mention Andrea. He did not mention the photographs, the apartment, or any of it. He talked about the invoices. He walked Clinton through the billing fraud the same way he would brief a subcontractor, methodically, without excess, one line item at a time. Duplicated charges, inflated hours, 2 invoices for services that were never rendered. Clinton stood with his arms crossed and listened without interrupting. His jaw tightened once, briefly, when Ward read out the total. "I need notarized copies of everything," Ward said. "Every overcharge, every supporting document, organized by date. And I need you at the dinner." Clinton looked at him for a moment. "You need me to bring them that night." "Yes." "Done," Clinton said. That was all. No questions about what would happen next. No commentary on what Dorian had done. Just the clean, simple yes of a man who had already decided that wherever Ward was going, he was going too. The morning of the dinner, Ward was in the garage by 6. He'd promised Ruth a wall-mounted shelf for her hallway months ago, back when things were different, and he'd had less on his mind. He hadn't forgotten. He'd just been waiting until he could give it the attention it deserved. He worked for 2 hours in the early quiet. The wood was white oak, solid, close grain, the kind that took stain evenly and held weight without complaint. He cut the brackets himself, sanded everything smooth by hand, fit the joints with the care he gave to things that were meant to last. When he was finished, he loaded it carefully into the truck bed. Ruth's house was 15 minutes away. She came to the door when she heard his truck in the driveway and had tea ready by the time he carried the shelf inside. He installed it in the hallway, level, flush, anchored properly into the studs. He did it without rushing. Ruth stood in the kitchen doorway with her mug and watched him work in the easy, appreciative silence of someone who understood what it meant when a man built you something with his own hands. When he finished, he stepped back and checked it. "Good?" she asked. "Good," he said. She made him sit for 10 minutes and drink his tea. They didn't talk about the dinner. They didn't talk about Andrea or Dorian or any of it. They talked about a book she was reading, about the cold that was coming. Ward drank his tea and let the quiet of his mother's kitchen settle over him like something being stored for later. Then he stood, hugged her, and told her he'd see her that evening. Back home, he showered and dressed carefully. Dark slacks, a fitted shirt the color of charcoal, shoes he'd had resoled twice because they were worth keeping. He sat on the edge of the bed and opened the leather notebook one final time. He read through it once. Every figure, every date, every name. He didn't need to. He had memorized all of it weeks ago. But he read it anyway, the way you walk through a finished structure one last time before the client takes possession, making sure everything is where it belongs. He closed the notebook. He set it on the nightstand. Downstairs, the front door opened. He heard Andrea's voice rise with hostess warmth. "You're here. Come in, come in." And then Dorian's laugh filled the hallway below, big and familiar. The laugh of a man who believed this was just another dinner. Ward stood, straightened his shirt. He walked out of the bedroom and moved toward the top of the stairs, his face composed and open, a steady smile already in place, the kind that reached his eyes, the kind that cost him nothing to produce any more. "Hey!" he called down. "Glad you made it." The food was good. That was the first thing. The lamb came out exactly right. Andrea had timed it perfectly. And the table smelled like rosemary and warm bread, and the kind of effort that makes people feel welcomed. Ward noticed this without sentiment. She had always known how to make a room feel like home. It was one of the true things about her. He let himself enjoy the meal. He laughed at Dorian's stories. Dorian had 3 of them tonight. One about a closing that nearly fell apart over a survey error. One about a judge he knew from law school. And one that Ward had actually heard before, but listened to again like it was new. Dorian told stories the way he did everything, with total confidence in his own audience, filling whatever space he was given. Beverly sat across from Ward and ate with quiet elegance. She had arrived in a burgundy-wrapped dress and spoke warmly about a hospital renovation she was overseeing. She and Ward had exchanged one look when she walked through the door. Brief, level, mutual, and that was all either of them needed. Ruth sat at Ward's left. She ate slowly and said little, which was exactly her way. She complimented Andrea on the lamb. Andrea beamed. Clinton arrived 10 minutes after the others, apologizing for a slight delay. He sat, accepted a plate, and settled into the kind of easy quietness that made him invisible to people who didn't know what to look for. Ward lifted his glass during the main course. "I want to say something," he said. The table softened. Forks lowered. "Dorian, 18 years. You've been at the table for all of it. The early stuff, the hard years, every contract that mattered." He looked directly at Dorian and held his gaze. "I wouldn't have built half of what I built without having you in my corner. That's the truth." Dorian's smile spread wide and slow, the smile of a man receiving exactly what he expected. "Brother," Dorian said, and raised his glass back. They drank. Every word of the toast had been true. Ward had not needed to lie once. Dessert was a chocolate torte Andrea had ordered from a bakery downtown. Ward had a full slice and told her it was excellent because it was. The conversation floated easily. A neighbor's renovation project, Beverly's hospital expansion timeline, a memory Clinton shared about a permits office in the 3rd Ward that had taken 3 weeks to answer a single phone call. Ward laughed at that one genuinely. He was in no hurry. When the plates were cleared and the coffee was poured, Ward set his cup down and folded his hands on the table. "I want to talk about the business," he said. His voice had not changed. The temperature of the room had. He looked at Clinton, who reached into the folder he'd kept beside his chair all evening and placed a neat stack of notarized documents on the table. Ward went through it the way he would present a project estimate to a difficult client, line by line, invoice by invoice. He named each date, each charge, each amount. He did not editorialize. He did not raise his voice. He simply read the record aloud, the way you read a thing when you want everyone in the room to understand that the record exists and always will. Dorian's expression moved through stages. Confusion first, performed well, but not well enough. Then a brief recalibration behind his eyes. Then the explanation came, smooth and quick. Billing errors, a paralegal who'd left the firm, a software migration that had caused duplicates in the system. Ward listened to all of it without moving. When Dorian finished, Ward reached to his left and placed Hazel's photographs on the table. He didn't arrange them. He didn't narrate them. He simply set them down, face up, in a clean stack. Beverly did not look at them. She reached into her bag, withdrew a sealed envelope, and slid it across the table to Dorian without a word. Her eyes did not leave her coffee cup. Dorian looked at the envelope. He did not open it. Andrea's voice entered the room. Careful, measured, building from a place of practiced sincerity. She had been quiet for the past several minutes, and Ward had noticed her organizing herself, finding her footing. She spoke about loneliness, about a marriage that had grown cold years before any of this, about a man who was always more present on a job site than in his own home. Her voice carried genuine feeling, the kind that comes from believing your own story completely. She was good. She had always been good. Ward waited until she finished. Then he opened the folder in front of him. He walked through the transfers. $47,000, 14 months, amounts she had kept small and irregular, and well below the threshold that would have triggered an alert. He named the account she had moved it into. He named the date the LLC was registered. Not 14 months ago. 3 years ago. 2 full years before the first dollar moved. The color in Andrea's face changed. Then Ward said, "And the will." Dorian stood up. Ward looked at him. "Sit down," he said. He said it once, quietly, without moving. Dorian sat. Ruth had not spoken all evening. She looked at Andrea now, and her voice was low and entirely without performance. "My son gave you his whole self. You should have treated that better." She did not say anything else. Ward let the silence hold for 3 full seconds. Then he pushed back his chair and stood. He looked at Beverly and said, "Thank you." He looked at Clinton and said, "Thank you." Then he turned to his mother, and his voice was the same voice he used when things were finished and done right. "Let's go, Mama." He walked out of his own dining room without looking back. Ward called Patricia at 7:15 the next morning. He was sitting in his truck in the driveway. The house was quiet behind him. The sun was just starting to clear the tree line, throwing long orange light across the hood. "Everything filed," Patricia said before he could ask. "The corrected will, the restructured assets, the bar complaint, the civil fraud filing. All of it went in yesterday afternoon. Move on, all of it," Ward said. "Today, already in motion." He sat for a moment after he hung up, watching the light move across the pavement. Then he started the truck and drove to a job site he actually needed to visit. The consequences arrived the way structural damage does. Not all at once, but in a sequence that, once it started, could not be stopped. The state bar complaint triggered a formal investigation within 2 weeks. Ward didn't have to do anything after that. The system moved the way systems do when the documentation is clean and complete. 3 other clients surfaced within a month. Small business owners, a property developer, a woman who had used Dorian's firm for an estate matter 2 years prior. They had all noticed discrepancy. None of them had said anything because Dorian was charming and credentialed and spoke with the authority of a man who expected to be believed. That authority disappeared quickly once people understood they were not alone in what they'd noticed. Beverly's divorce attorney was precise and unhurried. The apartment LLC surfaced in discovery on a Tuesday. By Thursday, Dorian had been served with 3 additional civil filings from former clients. The apartment was gone within 60 days, absorbed back into the marital asset pool that Beverly's attorney was systematically and thoroughly picking apart. Without Beverly's income, without the apartment, without the firm's reputation holding steady enough to bring in new retainers, Dorian lost his footing entirely. The practice didn't collapse in a single dramatic moment. It just stopped working. The way a building stops working when you remove enough of what holds it up. Clients didn't renew. Referrals dried up. The office manager found other employment. The junior associate he'd taken on 2 years ago quietly transferred her license to a firm across town. By the time the bar suspended his license, pending the full investigation, there wasn't much left to suspend. Andrea's divorce was unambiguous. The prenuptial agreement had been drafted by Dorian himself 11 years ago, back when he was Ward's trusted attorney and closest friend, back before any of this was anything. He had drafted it without explaining its full terms to Ward, assuming, correctly, that Ward trusted him completely, assuming, incorrectly, that it would never matter. It mattered now. The agreement's language was precise in ways that benefited Ward entirely. Andrea received what the law required, and nothing more. Her personal belongings, her yoga clients, a 1-bedroom apartment she had to furnish herself, with money she had to earn herself. She called Ward twice. Both times, he looked at her name on his phone and set it face down on the table and let it ring out. He did not block her number, and he did not answer it. He simply declined, the way you decline an estimate that doesn't make sense, without anger, without explanation. She called Ruth once. Ruth answered. She did not say hello. She did not say anything. She listened to Andrea's voice on the other end of the line, and when Andrea paused for breath, Ruth ended the call. That was the last time either of them heard from her. 14 months later. Ward stood at the edge of a cleared lot in the early morning, the kind of morning where the air was still cool enough to think clearly, and the light came in sideways and turned everything gold. The Community Recreation Center, his largest municipal contract, 3 buildings, a central field, a renovation of the original structure the city had been trying to do something with for a decade. Clinton stood beside him, tablet in hand, walking through the materials timeline for the week. "Concrete pour is confirmed for Wednesday," Clinton said. "Electrical team is staged. We're good." Ward nodded. He was watching the lot the way he always watched a new site, reading it, measuring it in his mind before a single instrument touched it. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Beverly. A brief, clean text. "Promotion effective last month. Hospital System Director. Board is reviewing a renovation project for our main campus. I'm recommending your firm. More to follow." Ward typed back, "Congratulations. We'll do right by you." He pocketed the phone. He was seeing someone. The narration didn't need to linger on this. It was enough to know that she laughed at his jokes before he finished them, which he found unreasonably delightful, and had stopped trying to explain. Ward reached into the chest pocket of his jacket and pulled out a new leather notebook, unmarked. He uncapped his pen, wrote the project name on the first line, and then wrote the second line, the beginning of his estimate. The numbers came the way they always came, clean, accurate, earned. He moved slowly across the site, measuring carefully. He wrote his numbers down. He closed the notebook. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.